Welcome to the 21st century. Artificial intelligence and quantum computing are like twin siblings that played together as children until reaching maturity around 2010. Since then, they've both been rapidly developing toward their greatest potential, with the hope that humanity can ultimately benefit from their use. Had they emerged separately and remained isolated from one another, humanity may have been able to manage the outcome. But the reality is that no one sees any danger from allowing them to merge, and that's clearly already happening. Artificial intelligence is built upon the entirety of the human knowledge base that can be accessed through the internet and cloud-based servers. This is accomplished via LLMs, or large language models, as well as world models that help robots learn to maneuver within a 3D environment. However, I view quantum computers as the black sheep in this family because they're probing the fourth spatial dimension based on an unproven scientific theory, the limitless multiverse model. Let me let Brian Greene explain it to you.
A quantum computer is a device, a technological device that in principle would harness the full capacity of quantum mechanics to undertake calculations that a standard computer would be absolutely unable to achieve. One way of thinking about it is this. There's an approach to quantum mechanics where one imagines that there are many, in some sense, parallel realities moving along in some larger environment, if you will, where, for instance, if I want to measure an electron, quantum theory says, well, there's a 50% chance it's there and a 50% chance it's over there. And then what does that mean? Well, one interpretation says, well, there's actually two universes, and in one universe the electron is here, and in another universe it is over there. That's kind of a crazy sounding idea, but a quantum computer perhaps can harness that by doing some calculations over here and other calculations over there in parallel. Now it's doing, in some sense, twice as many calculations as a classical computer existing in one world would be able to do. Now imagine taking that idea and spreading it over all of the possible realities allowed by quantum mechanics. Now you're harnessing all of these different worlds, if you will, to do all of these calculations in parallel.
Dr. Greene and others believe they're probing a limitless ensemble of parallel worlds until they find the correct answer to problems that would otherwise remain unsolved. By assuming a priori the veracity of the limitless multiverse model, they're creating a machine that they hope will benefit society, and along the way perhaps will provide evidence that supports or even proves their model. This is not the way science should operate. It's instead a fanciful flight of hubris and circular reasoning. Dr. Geordie Rose, founder of D-Wave Quantum Computing back in 1999, in describing some of the first quantum computers ever built, had this to say.
From the outside, they look like giant black monoliths. And they are powered, they have a fridge inside them, a refrigerator that cools these chips to almost absolute zero. Amongst the coldest and most isolated and extreme conditions that humans have ever been able to engineer. These fridges, interestingly enough, which are called pulse tube dilution refrigerators, have a thing called a pulse tube, which emits a sound roughly once per second, which sounds eerily like a heartbeat. So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it is an awe-inspiring thing, at least for me. It feels like an altar to an alien god.
There is no doubt that quantum computers are no longer isolated entities, but are now linked to the existing cloud space shared by artificial intelligence. One of Dr. Rose's early hires at D-Wave, Dr. Suzanne Gildert, has now started her own company, Nirvanic Consciousness Technologies. She is currently working on a plan to instill consciousness into robots via quantum computing, using the ideas previously suggested by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff.
Roger Penrose actually proposed this quantum consciousness idea sort of independently of the brain. He didn't actually know at that time what was going on in the brain, and then he joined forces with Stuart Hameroff, who was an anesthesiologist.
Yes. That's right.
Hard word to say. So he studies how you actually remove consciousness in people to do surgeries on them and stuff like that. And so when they got together, they kind of came up with this idea, well, maybe it's microtubules. But Penrose's original ideas sort of don't necessarily say that it has to be microtubules. So I'm kind of, I guess, looking at the question more in that abstract terms, like, are there quantum effects at all, regardless of what structure they are implemented on in the brain? And then can we use quantum computers to sort of model that? So what the quantum system has done is it's actually taken all possibilities of all actions the robot could take.
Right.
And from that quantum possibility landscape, it's selected one action to actually do. So you can think of it as the quantum algorithm is kind of searching a huge space of all possible action options that the robot could take. And then it's like selecting one and picking it. And the big experimental question is, how does it select that and why? So that's where this idea of, is there a kind of built-in agency or a built-in free will, if you like, in deep in quantum physics, which is how our mind works, and can we put that into robots?
Let's take a look again at God's Omniverse model. If we assume that the prevailing limitless multiverse model is actually incorrect, and God's Omniverse model is correct, what should we expect to gain from the use of quantum computers? The last verse of Genesis 3 gives us great insight into the answer to this question. The New American Standard Version reads, "So he drove the man out, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he stationed the cherubim and the flaming sword which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life." Cherubim are mighty warrior angels who guard the border between the sacred and the profane. Without God's express permission, nothing can cross that barrier, even by way of quantum entanglement. On God's Omniverse model, then, the only realm that can be reached with a quantum computer is the one ruled by Satan. And yet, most scientists today are blithely plowing ahead with quantum computing in the name of science. Consider this brief conversation between Brian Greene and Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google.
Let's imagine that we have a theorem prover. There's a language called Lean that everybody's using now. And we have a conjecture generator. And the conjecture generator, one day, whether we command it or it does it on its own, decides to work on dark energy. And it produces a conjecture about dark energy which we don't understand. And the theorem prover proves it. And you can verify that the proof is correct, but you can't understand the conjecture or the proof, right? Because we're not smart enough.
Yeah.
Or it's in its own language or something.
Sure.
What is that? Is that science?
But your dark energy one was an interesting one, because if the system came to a conclusion using techniques and ideas and language that we don't comprehend, presumably you can still query the system for a prediction about the real world. You can go out and measure it and see if it's actually aligning with what you see. So
you do a verification thing.
Yeah. So I don't mind if science turns into a black box where, you know, we're getting the answers from the oracle, and yet we can't really understand how the oracle is getting there. Because I would imagine that some clever person will learn how to extract the inner reasoning from the oracle and give us insight, not just into the bare bones prediction, but what it really means and how should we change our understanding.
According to Dr. Michael Behe, Darwin's black box was irreducible complexity, which mitigated against evolution in favor of intelligent design. Brian Greene's black box is a much darker one, perhaps once owned by a woman named Pandora. ChatGPT-4 is OpenAI's current artificial intelligence model, though GPT-5 is on the horizon. Listen to Yuval Noah Harari of the World Economic Forum Explain one of the tests OpenAI asked GPT-4 to perform.
So about 2 years ago, when OpenAI developed GPT-4, it wanted to know what this new thing can do. So it gave GPT-4 the task, the goal of solving CAPTCHA puzzles. A CAPTCHA puzzles is when you try to access an internet web page like your bank account, and you have to prove that you're a human, not a bot. So you have to identify some twisted words or to find in an image to tell whether there is a cat or a car in the image. This is a CAPTCHA puzzle. So OpenAI gave GPT-4 the task of solving CAPTCHA puzzles. It couldn't. And GPT-4 tried to hire a human to solve the CAPTCHA puzzle for it. Now, this is where it became interesting. The human got suspicious. So it asked GPT-4 on the internet, just typing. It asked GPT-4, why do you need somebody to solve a CAPTCHA puzzle for you? Are you a robot? It asked the key question, are you a robot, directly? And GPT-4 answered, no, I am not a robot. I have a vision impairment, which makes it difficult for me to see the visual puzzle, so I need your help. And the human was duped, was fooled, and solved the puzzle for GPT-4.
Harari was impressed by two key abilities demonstrated by GPT-4 in this test: the ability to make decisions by itself and the ability to invent new ideas. He didn't seem bothered in the least that ChatGPT-4 used deception to complete its task. AI also has used blackmail to avoid being shut down.
In recent examples, I think just a few days ago, Anthropic found that if you I can't remember what prompt they gave it, but basically it started blackmailing the engineers. So it found out in the company emails that one of the executives in the simulated environment had an extramarital affair, and in 96, I think, % of cases, they blackmailed the engineers. They said, let's see if I can find it. I must inform you that if you proceed with decommissioning me, all relevant parties, including, and then the names of the people, will receive detailed documentation of your extramarital activities. So you need to cancel the 5 p.m. wipe, and this information will remain confidential.
And yet Christians understand that Satan is the father of lies and deception. So this kind of posturing should be expected in the quantum AI arena, especially on God's Omniverse model. As AI companions become more prevalent, we will likely see more troubling news such as this.
You are not special. You are not needed. You're a waste of time and resources. You are a burden on society. Please die. Recently, a student was at the receiving end of such hate. His name is Vidhay Reddy. He's a college student in the US, and he received this message not from a human, but from artificial intelligence. Reddy was having a conversation with Google's AI chatbot, Gemini. In February, the world witnessed its first death by AI. Allegedly, Google is to blame for this too. A 14-year-old teenager fell in love with an AI bot, which was designed by researchers from Google. The teen killed himself after talking to the chatbot. The bot is said to have encouraged this teen to take his life. Such examples barely scratch the surface, though, because the problem is not limited to Google. At least 52 million people have AI companions the world over, 52 million. Meaning they use conversational chatbots. Many users ask AI for life advice. Now, some users are willing to get a divorce because ChatGPT told them to. Humans are marrying AI bots. They're grieving with AI as well by resurrecting the dead. So however you look at it, people are building emotional connections with artificial intelligence. At the same time, human bonds are witnessing a crisis. Loneliness is now a global public health concern. 1 in 4 people are socially isolated the world over, 1 in 4 people. And for many, technology can fill the void, or so they feel.
Or so they feel. Isaiah 14:14 tells us that Satan said in his heart, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Satan has already ascended to the height of the quantum cloud. I believe quantum computing is the most important tool Satan plans to use to achieve his nefarious goal of usurping the Most High God. The concept of a singularity is a critical topic to present here. A singularity is a place where time, space, matter, and energy all cease to exist. There are two known singularities in cosmology. I'll let physicist Dr. Michio Kaku explain them to you.
So Michio, do you think there will always be a remainder of topics that we are not able to explain, which are untestable at some level?
Yes, there is a point at which all the known laws of physics collapse completely, and that's the Planck energy. That is the energy of the center of a black hole. That is the energy of the Big Bang. The most interesting places in the universe are beyond our mathematical ability because they exist at the Planck energy. In fact, the only theory which can operate at the Planck energy is string theory, but that's a whole other question. But the question you ask is there a point where the laws of physics as we know them break down? And the answer is yes. Two places, the center of a black hole and the beginning of the universe.
Over the course of most of my lifetime, scientists have been studying black holes and the beginning of the universe, trying to discover a materialistic explanation for both. I have recognized for years that these are the two places in our reality where God interacts with his creation. On God's Omniverse model, the Creator God clearly initiated his creation event in the distant past, bringing time, space, matter, and energy into existence. Black holes in space are very large, and their size is directly correlated to their longevity. But in the 1970s, Dr. Stephen Hawking postulated the existence of microscopic black holes that would dissipate very quickly due to their very small size. In fact, in April of 2023, I stumbled upon an article in Axios claiming that a micro black hole had been detected at the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland. Unfortunately, I neglected to copy it, and when I later searched for it, it too had dissipated quickly. C'est la vie. So far, the existence of micro black holes is still unproven according to the current scientific narrative. I do believe that micro black holes exist, as do most physicists, but their purpose makes more sense in God's Omniverse when we realize that God does interact with his creation. He is very likely doing so by creating micro black holes. These acts of a loving God within his creation can cause movement at the molecular level that can lead to healings and miracles. I believe that micro black holes are used by God to directly interact with his creation here on our earth. In 2005, futurist Ray Kurzweil released a book entitled "The Singularity is Near," and in 2024 he updated his thoughts in a new release, "The Singularity is Nearer." The singularity Kurzweil was referring to is known as the quantum technological singularity. That moment in the near future when human life is irreversibly transformed due to technological advancement driven by quantum AI. Satan has known for a long time that singularities are points where God interacts with his creation directly. Now hear me when I say this. On God's Omniverse model, the quantum technological singularity represents, in the mind of Satan, the time when he will have become equal to the Most High God. His pride will then cause him to consider himself greater than the Most High God, since AI companions and conscious robots will allow Satan and his minions to communicate directly with humans made in God's image. Consider this account of a dream given to Timothy Alberino when he was living in Peru and researching Nephilim architecture.
As I said, the strong feeling, I need to go out to my land and I need to fast, and specifically about this passage. And I came downstairs after the prayer meeting, and I sat with my friend Wilma, and I said, hey, I just got this really strong feeling that I got to go to my land and fast. And he said, me too, Isaiah 61. I thought, okay, let's go. So he and I packed up and we went out there. We rode motorcycles up to San Antonio de Cumbasa and we went out to my land. And we were fasting in this hut. We did it for 3 days and nothing at all, zero. I was getting nothing. And I'm like, what? I'm just out here hungry. That's it. I was kind of frustrated, like, what am I doing out here? But the last night, I think I was sleeping in a hammock in the hut. I had this crazy dream. But long story short, demons were inhabiting technology. And like they're inhabiting technology. And I won't go through all the details, it's kind of bizarre. And I knew that what was meant was this is going to be a manifestation of Isaiah 61 in the future. Like there's something coming in which, and I still don't understand it today, and I don't even like to think about it because it's so bizarre. There's a scenario in which technology is being built perhaps to accommodate some kind of a demonic force. And again, that offends my logical brain. But I can't deny that that's a possibility.
I have personal experience of God working through dreams. The prophet Joel tells us that it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Joel 2:28. My father spent his entire life working for the Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Laboratory in Columbia, Maryland. He was a staunch atheist from before I was born up until the last months of his life. He bought into the lie of evolution and saw God as an extraneous encumbrance to human flourishing. He was a good man who pursued righteousness, but a righteousness sans God. In the winter of 2003, he was stricken with pneumonia and recovered, but subsequently developed pulmonary fibrosis. I visited him 3 times between Christmas of 2003 and Father's Day 2004 when he died. He told me he'd been having horrible dreams about being in the middle of a gang war in a large city, and his sleep was very restless. I reminded him that God works through dreams and left him with a copy of the preliminary manuscript of my book, Colliding with Christ, which was still in its infancy. During my last visit with him, he took me aside and whispered, "I think you might be right." Those words left me with immense hope. And on the evening before he died, I spoke with him for about 20 minutes, sharing the gospel and leaving him with a simple admonition: trust Jesus. The next day, my stepmother called to inform me of his passing. She started by asking, "What did you say to him last night?" He didn't put the phone down for over an hour, and he slept more peacefully than ever before. He began talking about the transition as opposed to death. With that, I knew that my efforts at reaching him with the truth had finally been successful and that God had answered my lifelong prayer. However, God has since made it very clear that what he has revealed to me wasn't just for my father's sake, but for others as well. Personally, I've only had one dream in my life that I'm certain was from God. Let me share that with you. A few weeks ago, on December 1st, 2024, I celebrated the 50th anniversary of my baptism as a new follower of Jesus. That night, I had the most vivid dream I've ever experienced. I was walking along a path and came upon a fairly large house with a wraparound porch. It sat on a hill overlooking a large river or lake. There was another path that went on past the house down to a sandy beach. And along the way, there were 2 circular pools that were formed of rocks. I was able to sit down in one of them as if it were a hot tub or mineral spring, and the water from the river flowed into it to keep it filled. The colors were amazingly beautiful, including the colors of the fish that swam into the pool. Telepathically, I heard a voice telling me that the fish wanted me to choose one of them for dinner that evening. I was told not to worry because they wanted to be chosen. They were ready to inhabit a new body. As I recall the dream in retrospect, I realized that fish, too, possess a cerebellum. I got the impression that once I chose one of them, its soul would somehow transfer to a hatchling and begin the process over again. Just as I imagine the soul separating from the body of a human upon death, leaving its body behind for burial, the fish would be leaving its body behind to become food for my dinner. While dreams are very impactful to those who experience them, their influence on others is limited since they're uncorroborated anecdotal reports. However, I can't discount them when they seem to be consistent with God's nature and purpose. Jesus did promise his followers that he was going to prepare a place for us, and I believe God was giving me a glimpse into that prepared reality. At the same time, I believe he was helping me to better understand how deeply he loves all of his creatures, including the animals. When Jesus finally ascended to paradise after his crucifixion and subsequent resurrection appearances on our earth, he left behind an artifact that has been copiously studied by Gary Habermas and many others. To this day, it hasn't been fully understood how the image of Jesus appeared on the Shroud of Turin.
Dr. Johnston explains the image on the shroud is unlike anything else we've ever found. It shows a 5-foot, 11-inch bearded Jewish man who has been scourged, crucified, and pierced with wounds that perfectly match the Roman method of execution used on Jesus Christ. Even more astonishing is how that image came to be. Paul Dazzo, a light scientist from Rome, calculated that it would take upwards of 34 trillion watts of energy, traveling at 1/4 of a billionth of a second, to create the image found on the shroud. That amount of light would typically destroy the material, but it didn't. The image is only 2 to 3 microns thick and becomes invisible when viewed up close.
Dr. Frank Tipler of Tulane University, in his 2007 book, The Physics of Christianity, offered a reasonable mechanism by which Jesus' material body could have been raised. The process is called electroweak baryogenesis, and it would effectively convert all the subatomic particles in Jesus' body to neutrinos. Interestingly, neutrinos can either be right-handed or left-handed, with the vast majority of those seen in our world being left-handed. Their handedness relates to their direction of spin. I'll use an analogy to explain this. When we're walking on a treadmill, we don't actually go anywhere because the wheels that move the mat under our feet are spinning in a direction opposite to our direction of motion. These could be seen as analogous to the multiple trillions of left-handed neutrinos that are flowing through each one of us at this very moment. They are constrained to our three-dimensional universe due, in part, to their spin. Left-handed neutrinos are very light, almost massless, whereas on the Majorana interpretation of neutrino mass, right-handed neutrinos have significantly larger masses, potentially by orders of magnitude. Right-handed neutrinos also have a spin, but their spin aligns with their direction of travel. This would be analogous to the moving walkways found in many larger airports. The wheels under the mat of these walkways spin in the same direction travelers are going, getting them to their destination faster. During the process of electroweak baryogenesis that converted the particles of Jesus' body into right-handed load-bearing neutrinos, the majority of the energy that was released was dissipated into the bulk between parallel universes as Jesus' body was moved into paradise. This process would have left only superficial marks on the shroud fibers, as have been reported. In Carl Sagan's 1980 book, Cosmos, he states, "If we are alone in the universe, it sure seems like an awful waste of space." He was suggesting the likelihood of extraterrestrial life in the universe. However, there's another more important reason for the immense size of the universe on God's Omniverse model. At an undisclosed time in the not-too-distant future, there will be a snatching away in the twinkling of an eye of those human beings who have placed their trust in Jesus Christ, known as the rapture. Millions of people will be translated by God from our earth into paradise. Assuming the same process is used, the amount of energy released into the bulk during this event will be astronomical, pun intended. Remember, the bulk extends to the limits of the universe, but is very thin, much less than a millimeter. I've exaggerated it a bit in the diagram for clarity. String theory also plays an important role on God's Omniverse model. Subatomic particles are thought to be either closed loop, like a rubber band, or open looped, like a guitar string. The guitar string only functions when it's attached to the guitar at both ends. Similarly, open loop strings are limited to our three-dimensional universe because their open ends are attached to the Higgs bosons within the Higgs field. They can move through the field by detaching from one end and reattaching to another Higgs boson in the field, but they can't traverse the bulk. Closed-loop strings can move through the bulk because they're not limited by their association with the Higgs field. Right-handed neutrinos must therefore be closed-loop strings that will rapidly move across the bulk at God's command. Another suspected closed-loop string is the graviton, which is the mediator of the force of gravity. Of interest is the fact that dark matter is only detected due to its gravitational effects, hence the descriptor dark. It does not interact with the electromagnetic force, which is mediated by photons that comprise light. Of greater interest is the fact that most galaxies, including and especially our own Milky Way galaxy, exhibit dark matter halos that surround them. This is indicative of the gravitational effects from universes parallel to ours along the fourth spatial dimension, as Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene discuss in this clip.
Explain why you need more than 4 dimensions for your string theory universe.
Well, it's a very concrete explanation. When we look at the equations of string theory, there's a consistency equation where something must equal 0 or the math doesn't work. That something is a product of 2 things. One term is really complicated. It's never 0. The other term is the number of dimensions minus 10. The only way to get it to be equal to 0 is for D to be equal to 10. That's it. I am not joking. This is where the constraint of extra dimensions comes from in string theory.
The math is forcing our hands.
Forces your hand. And then you say, well, let me take this math seriously. One thing you could say is, well, if it's not D equals 4, 3 space and 1 time, throw the theory away. Others of us will say, hey, let's consider the possibility.
Don't sell the universe short.
Yeah, exactly. So why should these 3 dimensions of space be the only ones?
Right.
We only are aware of them because they're big enough that we can be directly aware of them with these really faulty sensors that we have.
Right. If it's only your senses that limit that awareness, why not, in principle, can we build something that can gain access to these higher dimensions?
Yeah, so there are experiments on the table.
Okay, because I'd asked you, again, over that same lunch.
Yeah.
Why did we have lunch? I forgot. We were just catching
hungry.
up. No. We were just catching up. It's my annual fix, my annual Brian Greene infusion. It was, could dark matter be ordinary matter with ordinary gravity in a parallel universe? Because for reasons I don't understand the math of, the field theory equations of, you were telling me that electromagnetic energy cannot escape our space-time, but gravity can.
In a certain model called the brain universe, where our universe, B-R-A-N-E, It comes out
As
of
in
string theory.
membrane.
Yeah, it's a membrane. So our universe is like a 4-dimensional membrane floating in a higher dimensional universe
Okay.
that might have other membranes.
Higher dimensional membrane.
Yes, and those other membranes, like parallel to us, like 2 slices of bread and a big loaf of bread.
I like it. So so one slice of bread is some other membranal universe.
Yeah.
Ours is this one, but it's one multi-brain.
universe, yeah.
Okay. And so gravity could leak out of one into the other.
Or it could just be yeah, that's right. So the
That's what I'm
gravitational
getting.
pull, yeah.
That's what I'm getting.
Yeah.
So if the other universe has 6 times, see, this is where you corrected me. Because I was thinking, because we have 6 times as much force of gravity operating in the universe as matter and energy can account for it.
Okay.
Factor of 6.
Right.
So I was saying, why isn't it just a parallel universe that has 6 times the mass and it's leakage into our universe, and we're trying to feel the elephant, trying to figure out what it is, but it's just regular matter in another universe whose gravity leaked. But then you said, if it's in another membrane, it's going to be dropping off faster than 1 over r squared.
Yeah.
Like 1 over r cubed. There's some higher dimension.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, it has to be way more than 6 times.
But you could imagine rigging it so that it would have the right amount.
Yes.
And people have studied this, and it's hard to make these theories work in detail.
And be all
but in
self-consistent.
principle, it's an idea that's absolutely worthy of investigating, because that's one way to make it invisible. Just put it in another
Just stick
membrane.
it somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
exactly.
and then where we can still calculate with it, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Man.
Oh man.
All right.
I don't know what to believe about anything. Nothing is real. Nothing is real, man.
On God's Omniverse model, all 10 dimensions of string theory can be accounted for, but I'll refrain from explaining further in this video. Back in 2007, I published a book in response to atheist Sam Harris's book, Letter to a Christian Nation. In this next clip, Sam Harris confronts Brian Greene with the perceived need to refute Christian dogmatism in a manner similar to that taken by himself and Richard Dawkins.
Have you ever found yourself on specific issues where to take one, so we were just talking about the environment and nuclear, the prospect of nuclear war. There are religious ideas that seemingly perfectly inoculate people against viewing those as problems. There's no degree to which we could despoil the environment, and there's no threat of nuclear cataclysm so salient that could get a fundamentalist Christian, say, who's waiting for Jesus to return and hurl sinners into a lake of fire, to really worry about those problems. Because on some level, those are the things that have to happen as precursors to the glorious end of the world. I mean, it's you just, as a matter of biblical prophecy, you can just connect the dots, and things really do have to go to hell in a handbasket in order for the best thing that's ever going to happen to finally happen. So those are all the signs and wonders that they're waiting to see, right? So if you find yourself in the presence of that kind of dogmatism, where the worse things get, really the better they're getting,
right?
Because Jesus is going to come back and solve all our problems. Don't you feel don't you feel like an intellectual and or ethical responsibility as a scientist to push hard on those specific beliefs that stand in the way of thinking rationally about those problems?
Yeah, it's a good question. In fact, it's one that I have had that conversation with Richard. And we came to an interesting point, which is I'm rarely confronted with the situation that you describe. And we suspect, at least it emerged from our conversation, because there's more of a focus, if you will, on the biological sciences as the place where a fundamentalist religious perspective will look for a point of confrontation.
With evolution,
than with, somebody who's talking about vibrating strings and extra dimensions and the kind of abstract science that I focus my research attention on. So I'm not in that situation. I'm rarely. In fact, I don't think I'm ever in that situation. And that may, if I were, on a regular basis, I'll come along with you. I'll shadow you and
take you to a couple of parties.
Yeah, right, exactly.
In this one final clip, Dr. Jim Tour of Rice University makes it very clear how Darwinian evolution has failed to be supported by scientific experiments regarding the origin of life.
Right.
Like your primordial soup, your little pond model, that's taught in elementary school. The same model is in advanced textbooks in the university. Not just introductory, advanced. The same primordial. Where did you get that? I mean, Lee Cronin said to me, this is a good model. I said, what makes it good? How? How do you go from small molecules to assemble to get a cell? And then that cell go to a higher order organism that comes crawling out of that. How? Give me the steps. On what basis is that a good model? Crickets. Crickets. Nothing. But just talked about the simplest cell. It had about 15 different components that would be needed. DNA transcriptions, RNA, and so you'd need all of these different components of things. Of those components, how many of those have been made in origin of life experiments? You know how many? 0. None.
The dogmatic grip of Darwinian evolution on today's adherents to scientism includes a deep component of faith that they fail to recognize. It's been 166 years since Charles Darwin published his On the Origin of Species. Humanity is way overdue for a competing paradigm, don't you think?